Hi, I'm Jacob Wood from Accessible Games and the chief editor of Accessible Gaming Quarterly. I'm here today with Dale Critchley, the owner of Wyrmworks Publishing, and the mind behind Limitless Heroics, Dungeons and Dragons with Disabilities. How are you doing today, Dale?
Oh, I'm doing great. Good to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining me. Um, First of all, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about accessibility with us. For those of us, though, who aren't familiar with your work already, can you tell us a little bit about what you've published in the past?
Sure. Wyrmworks Publishing is dedicated to helping you make lives better with tabletop role-playing games. And right now we're specifically focusing on 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, but that may change in the future. And so what we're best known for is Limitless Heroics, including characters with disabilities, mental illness, and neurodivergence in 5th edition. It's a 640-page compendium of ways to implement different traits in characters, PCs, NPCs, magic items, service animals, all kinds of related things, 50 NPCs to go with it as examples. And so that's been really popular. We've had a lot of just phenomenal feedback, very successful Kickstarter. And then since then we've been dovetailing off of that, creating some small adventures and things like that, and also exploring other methods of representation. And so now we're moving on to our next project, Limitless Champions.
That's awesome. That sounds right up my alley. Full disclosure, I was a backer of Limitless Heroics and I'm a backer of Limitless Champions. So I do have a little bit of skin in this game myself, but I'm here with Dale because I really appreciate what you're doing, first of all, and I think we need more of this in tabletop. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about that. I know that you frequently use the term limitless to title some of your projects, like Limitless Heroics and Limitless Champions. What does that mean to you, to use limitless as a method to convey whatever it is you're wanting to say about disabilities?
Yeah, so in most media, on rare occasions where disabled, neurodivergent, or mentally ill characters appear, usually there's little more to that character than the condition, or else it's the focus of the plot. They may flesh out the character, but the plot is all about their experience or that trait. And that's even more the case in tabletop role-playing games, where people just actively argue against having that kind of representation in their worlds. So what I find is that the limits that we encounter are not the disability so much limiting us, but an inaccessible culture. And so that concept of limitless imagines worlds that recognize and value us as individuals without ableist prejudice, including ultimately the real world. We hope that that by bringing reality into fantasy worlds, that we can make the real world more fantastic.
That's awesome. Yeah, that reminds me of a quote from, I'm going to forget half of her name, Stella something, but she says that it's not her disability that disables her, it's the world that disables her. And it feels like that's kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like that's kind of the direction that you're going with that. Is that right?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, that's awesome. You said that you're currently kickstarting Limitless Champions. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Limitless Champions is the largest collection and most diverse collection of disabled fantasy miniatures ever created. Up to this point, about the only minis that have been created are the Dungeons and Diversity line from Strata Miniatures that they did in connection with the combat wheelchair, which are really cool, and I highly recommend them. But it's wheelchairs, which is great, and really the first time that we've seen wheelchairs represented. But I see that as a good start. People like having minis that look like their characters, and so if you're going to have disabled characters, it's nice to have minis representing them. And so we wanted to broaden that representation. And so we have characters with blindness that use staffs, and we have having a braille book in the hands of one of them. And great thing about 3D printing is it's actual braille in the book.
Nice.
And we have characters with two different representations of cerebral palsy, and one is more noticeable in the arms, and one more so in the neck, or I'm sorry, arms and neck in one, and legs in the other. And we have a dragonborn who has dwarfism, right? Like not fantasy dwarf, like actual representation of a specific form of dwarfism, where we talked to some people from that community and made sure that we got that representation right. I mean, which we did pretty much across the board, but but you know, we thought, okay, well, what about like actual dwarfism instead of the sort of thing that you get you know, with just the sort of fantasy race, or the way that the D&D movie did halflings, where they didn't actually hire little people. I'm a bit frustrated by that. But so yeah, we just got a big wide variety of different experiences, including anxiety, which you know, a lot of people with invisible disabilities often feel left out, and so we wanted to include that too. And so we have a character who has a couple characters that have grounding or fidget devices that help them to cope with their anxiety. And then in addition to the miniatures, which are available as both STLs if you have a 3D printer, or what I recommend is check, if you don't have a 3D printer, check with your local library, because a lot of times you can print them free or very cheap there. And or else you can upgrade, you can pay for the printing to be done and have them shipped to you. And then we also have condition markers to go along with that. Where you can just set the mini on a little platform, and each platform has a different shape to represent the different 5th edition conditions. In addition to like one for flight, which isn't specifically a condition, but it's something you want to mark. And then in addition to having some sort of mnemonic shape to help you just by look or by touch to recognize what that is. If you forget what that represents, we're also having Braille on the bottom of all of them, so that for easy reference. And then we've got a PDF including all 20 of the characters, that with a more in-depth write-up of the 5th edition stat block, background, personality, and stuff like that, so that you can include those characters in your game. And then we have cards that have the artwork for the characters on one side, and then their stat block on the other side. That's a little more abbreviated and stuff, so that you can fit it on the cards. But that way a DM can show that to the players and say, you know, here's what they look like, and then have that right there for easy reference. And then we had some people say, hey, but I'm, you know, I play online and I don't really use miniatures, but I want to support this. And so so we also created a digital tier that where it doesn't have the miniatures, but then the cards are available as a PDF and JPEG images, so that you can show them online. You can have that. You can just import that into your whatever you're using to keep track of all that stuff. And then we're creating wallpapers featuring the artwork from all the characters in different backgrounds. And then speaking of characters and backgrounds, we also have our top tier includes a chest. It's like a jewelry box that so it's padded and like velour on the inside, and then the outside, the top, we're putting a ceramic plate, and my wife and I are doing these by hand to make sure that they're just right. And what you be able to do is choose a background and one of the characters, and then we will imprint that onto the ceramic plate and put it in the sort of frame on the top of the chest. And so you get a real nice case to hold your miniatures, cards. You probably fit some dice in there too. It's 6x8, so it's a pretty decent size to to fit miniatures and stuff. So that's available as a kind of a top tier.
That sounds awesome. I really love the way you're designing the minis with a tactile feel in mind. I'm legally blind myself, and I absolutely love minis, but it's so hard to play with minis nowadays. And as my vision has gotten worse and worse over the years, I find myself reaching for them less and less. But having a way to tactily identify them would be awesome. So I really love that you've thought about that.
Yeah, we have other things that we're working on too that we haven't figured out the logistics of how to do it. And one of those things is a tactile grid, like an overlay kind of grid that you put over a map, and it would have where you can feel the hex grid or square grid and be able to actually count the squares or spaces, and that. So it's we bought some equipment, but to do it, but we're not quite there yet. So
yeah, that's kind of the next challenge.
Yep.
Well, awesome. I did want to address this. Let's not shy away from it. I know that Limitless Champions has gotten some backlash from disabled and non-disabled gamers alike. How would you address those concerns that people have about representing disabled characters in their RPGs?
So we've gotten questions from a few different angles. Some of it is people with say, look, I have disabilities and I want to imagine myself without them. And so why would I want to include that in my game? All right, and that is 100% valid. It's
for sure.
Of course, does not force that on anyone. All right, but it's not true of everyone. Right, a lot of people want to represent themselves. A lot of people like to imagine themselves in fantasy worlds, whether they have disabilities or not. And in fact, I would argue that every character that we create has a little piece of us somewhere in it.
Yeah.
And so we want to provide the tools to make that possible. But even if you don't want, to play a disabled character, you might want to at least include disabled NPCs in your campaign world. You've got an innkeeper with a cane, or an armorer in a wheelchair, a blacksmith with lung disease from all that stuff they're constantly breathing, or just a variety of different experiences that way, just to round out your campaign world, and to add that level of the way that I think of it is when I think of myself and my personal experiences with ADHD and being hard of hearing, and some mobility issues. I would want to feel welcome in your campaign world. I want my friends that have those different disabled or neurodivergent or mentally ill experiences to feel welcome in my campaign world, like they would fit in there. And so that's a way of doing that is by including characters where they say, oh yeah, that's just like me. Even if they're not playing a character like that. So some people don't like the system that we develop just because it's around Dungeons and Dragons, and it's pluses and minuses, and it's a little more complex than that, and not always that, but it is based on those game rules, so that you can use it in your game. And some people say, well, I don't want to be represented that way, and to which we say, okay, great, make something different. Because here's the thing is, I don't, we have made no claims and will never make a claim that we sort of have the corner or the best idea on how to do this. The stuff that we've created is as much a, here's one way to do it. Now go do, it's go do better,
Mhm.
like I'd be perfectly happy if people say, you should do it this way. Here, use this instead. Like, great, yeah, let's have
Yeah.
more. Let's have every game, every system, coming up with all different ways so that everyone can find something that works for them. That
Mhm.
where they feel like, yes, this. And because now, I mean, I've had lots of people say, this is exactly like this is my life right here, these mechanics that you developed, and I just I've had people say, I was reading through when we sent out the manuscript for Limitless Heroics before we printed it to get feedback from everyone and make sure we were representing as many experiences, getting as much feedback as possible. I got notes from people saying I was literally up all night crying
Oh man.
because I've never, I've just never felt so understood and
Mhm.
stuff. And and so, but yeah, like if you don't feel like that, when you look at our work, then you know come up with something else by all means. And in fact, we'll promote it. you know, I mean, we just want to see more of that kind of thing,
Mhm.
more options. And so yeah, right now there's only a handful of other people doing anything.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, make your own. And or if for some people they just want it the representation to be purely narrative, right? And that's fine too.
Yeah.
And so um, s- s- but if other people like the way that that they feel that this does represent them and they feel like this really captures their experience, then don't discount that either.
Mhm.
So um the biggest argument that we continue to run into is there's magic, and so if
Mhm.
there's magic, why would you have disabilities? And I saw a recent comment on that I thought that really captured. I mean, and there's all different approaches. First of all,
Mhm.
there's the whole social model of disability versus the medical model. All right.
For sure. Yeah.
And just even from the medical standpoint, all right, in our world, we have laser eye surgery, but people like me still wear glasses.
Mhm.
All right. Now I could go get laser eye surgery. All right. I can't afford it.
Right.
And not only the physical, I mean, or just the financial cost of the surgery that my insurance doesn't cover, but also the time that it would take because there's this recovery period,
Mhm.
and I don't have that kind of time. Uh, I've got too many other things going on that I can't do that. And
Mhm.
so there's availability. When you look at a D&D world, just imagine, use an example of a disease like polio, all right?
Mhm.
Is running through a city of, let's say, 10,000 people. All right, 10,000 people, maybe, um, you know, the D&D rules say that, a cleric, it's not every clergy person is a
Right.
cleric. They're rare, right? And so if all clerics are rare, then, even one that's high enough level to cast a second level cleric spell like minor restoration to heal a
Mhm.
disease. All right. So they can cast it maybe once or twice a day. All right. Meanwhile, what's the infection rate? How fast is it
Right.
spreading compared to that? Whole lot
Yeah.
more than one or two people a day. All right. So it's spreading way faster than they can keep up. All right. So even after it's kind of worked its way through and you're not really dealing with the spread anymore, or you've managed to quarantine or isolate or or whatever,
Mhm.
then healing the resulting paralysis that comes from polio. Um, Also, same spell, you can only do one or two a day. And So if you're doing one a day in a city of 10,000 people, well, you can get to everybody in 27 years.
Yeah, precisely. And let's not even bring up the fact that something like the regenerate spell, which you would need arguably to cover some other types of conditions,
Right.
is even higher level.
Right.
Requires an even more precise series of circumstances to even be viable.
Right. And and then that there's all kinds of other factors, that would be involved in that. Then some things that, could be helpful and some not, or whatever. But also clerics aren't Walgreens. There's other things that they're doing than just, going around handing out healing. And they're not on every on the corner in every population center. So given that, if you look at the whole world population, or even of a region, there might be one in the city, but you're going to have a really large rural population too that that has never even been to the city.
Yeah.
And so then, and the other thing is, if you look at the restoration spells, regenerate and things like that, they don't actually do everything that a lot of people think they do. All right, they have a specific list, and there's kind of some vague wording in there where the DM could say, well, yeah, I think it also includes this. All right, but for the most part, they're pretty specific in what they can and can't do. And and even something as powerful as a regeneration spell is not going to do anything if someone was born with only one arm, because you can't regrow something that you never had in the first place. It's like trying to regenerate a tail on an elf.
Yeah.
So and that's also a perception thing. Okay, if you're born with one arm, all right, are you missing that arm? I mean, we'll use that terminology, but it's kind of ableist terminology.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's not like it's not like your elves are gonna look at humans and say, oh, you were born missing points on your ears. So yeah, it's we're or hey, you were dragonborn looking at us going, oh man, you were born without scales. You're missing scales. Like, well, no, they're not missing. It's just who I am. And so it's also that, just because when I think about, as someone with ADHD, would I want to be healed of that? No. I mean, it definitely presents challenges in my life, and we've got some standing jokes around my house about my memory and things like that. But at the same time, it really helps me in a lot of ways, with creativity and things like that, and it makes me who I am, and I wouldn't want to get rid of it. And even though I'm neurodivergent, I'm not neurotypical. All right, that doesn't mean that typical is the ideal.
For sure.
And so yeah. Then the other thing is that even beyond the kind of arguing about the details of the rules, to me, what it comes down to is that players are more important than characters. That you can scrap a character, you can change a character or whatever, but ultimately the player is the important person here. And players owe your campaign world nothing, but your campaign world owes the players everything. It's nothing without them. All right. And so when you create a fantasy world, do you want disabled, neurodivergent, and mentally ill people there? All right. And if not, right, and maybe you have a reason, that you don't want them there for whatever reason. But at least think about it. At least consider it, because I've talked to so many people that have said, I've never included them, and I never even thought about it. And it wasn't an intentional exclusion. I just never thought about it. And now that I thought about it, now that you brought it to my attention, yes, absolutely, I wanted them included. So
that's a really great. Oh, sure. Sorry, go ahead.
Just going to say, Representation communicates welcome, right? Even if it's NPCs in the backgrounds. Like I said before, when I look at that world, do I feel like I would be welcome there? Do I feel like I could live there? Is that a place where I'd want to go at least for a little while? So
yeah, that's really great segue into what was going to be my next question, was what's your favorite complaint that makes you roll your eyes at how ridiculous it is? And my example personally is that some people will say, well, people with disabilities aren't excluded from RPGs because anybody can play a disabled character at any time. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But what you were just saying about, representation matters. It just showing up and saying, here's the open door for people who are disabled to come and play my game and see themselves in it, helps them kind of look at the game and look at the play space from an angle maybe that they've never even considered before. As a disabled person myself, it wasn't until I really started digging into accessibility in role playing that I thought, you know what? I haven't seen anybody like me in a game before. I've never played a blind character because it didn't even cross my mind. So I love that you're populating your worlds with people from all sorts of different backgrounds, because that does open that space. It opens the door for people to start thinking about things in a way that maybe they hadn't before. And then they can explore for themselves whether they're the type of person who wants to see themselves and their disability in their game, or wants to exclude their disabilities from their games. But at least people are starting to have that conversation. And I love that you are such a big part of making that happen.
I just, and that's what it comes down to is have the conversation, it's talk to the people that you play with, or, wherever you hang out, and talk about role-playing games and stuff, and have the conversation. That's the value. If you decide not to do it, you still have the conversation. But I've also seen people say, wow, this, I've been learning a lot more because this has sparked my interest in other things too. And now, I have a better, I'm learning more about what accessibility really means, and, and things like that. Yeah, no, mine is the disabled people wouldn't survive in a D&D world.
Oh, brother.
And so, which is really a contradiction of the whole. Also, there's magic that can heal people. So even if you do get injured or whatever, that okay, but maybe you could find a little magic to at least take care of whatever minor injuries came along or something. But I look at how in the Middle Ages, disabilities were more common, disease was more rampant and all that kind of stuff. And while on the one hand, the age you're, people didn't live as long because of all those things. They still lived.
Sure.
I mean, to say that, that people couldn't survive in a world like that, it's well, for one, I mean, it really denigrates disabled people and says, oh, you're just completely helpless. But it also just ignores the community focus of cultures before we compartmentalized ourselves. Because it used to be that in that society, and really up until, I don't know, 50 years ago or so, we were much more connected to our neighbors and our community, and helping each other out. And I remember when I was a kid, we had a elderly woman that lived next door to us, and she wasn't able to go out and shovel her walk in Wisconsin in the wintertime. And so as kids, like, we did, we helped her out, and and she would give us cookies and and stuff, and it was just we were just neighbors, and so in a world like that, people are going to help each other out, and each person contributes in different ways. And And I think that we've kind of lost that in our culture as we've become more isolated. And so when we're thinking from our isolated perspective, it seems like, well, okay, if this were me, oftentimes knowing, people that are not disabled, and so making all kinds of assumptions already, but even people that are, they're not really thinking, they're thinking, okay, could I survive by myself? No, but okay, I mean, I couldn't survive by myself if you threw me into that world, I would need help.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is, when you look at just people in the Middle Ages, and all of the, I mean, you have, okay, I've recently learned about Vlad Dracula had porphyria as a blood disease. Here this is Dracula, like he's
Right.
Vlad the Impaler, strikes fear, just his name still. And he had, this blood disease that was, he was disabled in a sense. And, but it didn't stop him. If anyone who's watched the Vikings show, Ivar the Boneless was on there. And we don't know exactly what but I mean, he's a historical figure. And I was doing some research on this. King John of Bohemia was blind, but he continued to fight on horseback.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, Timur, the founder of the Timurid Empire, who conquered big swaths of Asia, had disabilities on his right side. He did just fine. Richard III had scoliosis. Robert the Bruce is believed to have leprosy toward the end of his life. And so there's we found lots of like warriors using prostheses and things like that. I mean, people kept going. and
for sure.
And we're, it didn't stop them, from fighting. And boy, if you can add some of the sort of superhero powers that you get from from character classes, then you do just fine, especially if you have a party that's all helping each other out.
Absolutely. I could talk about this sort of thing endlessly, but in the interest of time, what other projects do you have coming up?
All right, so Limitless Champions is a part 1 Kickstarter. We're going to follow it. It's done. It's in the miniatures are done. We're doing some little bit of final cleanup work on just to make sure that they're all set for for printing and everything. There's no errors in the files or anything like that. But I mean, they're good to go. I've printed them all, and they're all great. We just want to make them a little bit better. And the book is in layout. The cards are done. Everything's ready to go. And by the time the campaign is done and the sort of waiting period where the payouts come out and all that kind of stuff, like it'll be ready to go. It'll be ready to fulfill immediately. And so then as soon as that's done, we are going to post the follow-up, which is going to be Limitless Champions Adventures. And so that is going to be adventures featuring these characters, right? Which those are pretty much written too, and just need to be edited, and a little bit of play testing on 1 or 2 of them yet. But those will be ready to go pretty quick too. And so even if you don't want the miniatures or whatever, I think this adventures book is going to provide a nice collection of different environments and stuff, and ways to introduce these characters and into your game, and just kind of show how to use these concepts and characters in a respectful way. Oh, and I should have mentioned in the Limitless Champions PDF, we also have a section on the respectful use of the characters and accessibility and stuff like that. And our previous book that we mentioned, Limitless Heroics, also has a big section in the front of it. And that whole section, even if you don't buy the book, we have a preview version on Drive-Thru RPG, and all of that content is free in that free preview version. It's all there. So we want to make this as widely accessible as possible. So, and then once we get that all done, then this fall, we're working on another book called Limitless Quests, and Jacob here is one of our writers for that. I'm very excited about that. And and speaking of different ways to do representation, all right, this book is going to be another way to do that. And so we're going to have we've got people that are going to be doing adventures or other kind of pieces on, well, Jacob's doing one on blindness, and then we've got one on autism. I'm doing one on ADHD, and then we're also, and we've got a few others too. And then, so those are going to be, just taking other different approaches to show different ways that you can do representation. That book is also going to introduce a new campaign world that is going to be the basis of future products, and that is being designed by me and someone named Cass James, who he's a professional accessibility consultant, and this is actually a campaign world that he has developed and used, and we're sort of buying it from him and working with him to use that, and then we're going to expand on what he's got, and really what I want to look at is just this concept of a world where you have accessibility, and it's not, people say, well, it's just, pandering or whatever, but we really want to demonstrate is the concepts of universal design are beneficial to everyone, and that, that you can have greedy villains who are implementing accessibility in different ways because it's beneficial, for them. It also happens to be beneficial for other people too, but that there are just very very practical reasons to broaden accessibility.
Sounds like you are going to be a very busy person this year. But that is awesome.
It's my ADHD. The ideas come faster than I have time to implement them all.
I feel you there. Well, before I get to my final question and have you plug where we can find you and all of those good sorts of things, I did have one other kind of oddball question for you. If you could have any 5th edition special ability or power, not including magic spells, what would it be, and how would you use it to make or acquire dinner?
Clone. I always say that, like the sort of question of what superpower would you like to have, or or whatever. And for me, it's always I want to be able to be in more than one place at a time, because I've one of my favorite movies is Spider-Man 2, where he struggles between his personal life and his superhero life, and and it's like I can't be in 2 places at once, and I find so often that there's different people that need my help, and I what I hate more than anything is the feeling of helplessness, that someone needs my help and I can't help them, and so just to be able to be in more than one place at a time, or to sort of duplicate myself and go, okay, you go do that, help them out so I can help these people over here. So yeah.
Awesome. Gives you more time to create too.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we go, where can people find you online, and what kind of parting thoughts might you have for us?
Okay, so wyrmworkspublishing.com, is worm with a Y like the dragon, is our website, and that's the best place to find all of our stuff. Sign up for our weekly emails, and we've got all kinds of coupons and other very helpful, positive things in there. I am on Mastodon. I have a Twitter presence, but that Twitter presence is automated. I don't really, I try to avoid it as much as possible.
I don't blame you.
So, but I am on Mastodon, which I think it's a more comfortable place. So, and I'm at dice.camp at Wyrmworks Dale. And also the other place that's a great place to find us and see some of the extra stuff that we're doing, some exclusives, is our Patreon. If you go to Patreon, Wyrmworks Publishing, we've got just a ton of stuff it's actually the most accessible and affordable way to access all of our content, or say all of our published content, including a lot of exclusives, works in progress, things like that. Yeah, as far as final thoughts, I was I get pretty regular posts, notes from people, emails and things from people that say, I have never had my experience represented in any form of media, not TV, not movies, nothing. And now I'm in D&D. And or they feel like someone noticed them for the first time as more than just an object of pity. You know, empathy's nice, pity not so much. Others have said that we made them aware of accessibility concepts they never thought of before. You know, ableism is still the most widely accepted form of discrimination. And I think that's clear by this discussion. And that's why that we are the first Kickstarter that's had these kind of character, or the first, you know, anywhere that we've, you know, go find a character with Down syndrome. Good luck with that. We've got that. And so I want to see more of that. I want to see what we're doing to not be kind of unique and, you know, and that it's just everybody's doing it, because, and just, if you picture this, right? Imagine that you have disability representation just becomes common in tabletop role-playing games in all different worlds. You see it, it's there, people get used to it. And to the point that where it's sort of odd when it's not included. Like, wait a minute, where's, okay. And then as they, you know, as people get used to that, then they start to recognize that exclusion in other forms of media. And then they start to ask why. And when you have 15 million D&D players all asking why, and they're voting with their wallets and they're calling it out, you know, then you're going to start to see that representation in other forms of media. And then, you know, that's going to shape awareness of the general population. It's just going to help people understand what accessibility is all about. They're going to feel less uncomfortable around disabled people, and it's just going to become more integrated into everybody's lives, which just makes like the whole real world more accessible. So
I love it.
That's our dream.
Oh. Well, Dale, thank you so much for joining me today. Everybody else, you can go check out the Limitless Champions Kickstarter. And if you're watching this after the Kickstarter ends, then check out Dale's next venture, because there are a lot of them coming up throughout the year. And definitely, if nothing else, check out the Patreon, because you can always keep up to date. Thank you, Dale.
All right, thanks, Jacob. It was thrilled to be on.